Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning.
Back from Crete, back from London.
We are.
Good to have you at home.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning,
Vinbai.
And good morning, Rufai. I'm okay. Thank you, guys. That's awesome.
Travel all over.
Thank you. But let me tell you what is happening around the world. Now, we reported this story during yesterday's newspaper review, but it has developed further. And that's as the United States has demanded a $15,000 visa deposit from citizens from Malawi and Zambia. Let's take a listen to what the State Department spokesman had to say.
Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, consistent with Executive Order 14159, beginning August 20th, nationals of Malawi and Zambia applying for B1, B2 business and tourist visas will be required to post a bond of up to $15,000. This targeted common sense measure reinforces the administration's commitment to U.S. immigration law while deterring visa overstays.
Well, this move is a revival of a controversial U.S. visa bond policy targeting travelers from countries with high visa overstay rates. Now, Malawi and Zambia, they each have overstay rates of 14 and 11% respectively. That's according to 2023 State Department data released in August of last year. Now, the same statistics show a visa overstay rate by Nigerians of 7%. Now, this 12-month program, it is a pilot. It will allow U.S. consular officers to demand refundable visa bonds ranging from $5,000 all the way up to $15,000 from applicants during their interview seeking to visit the United States for business or tourism. Now, the policy is set to take effect from the 20th of August, and several African countries, including Nigeria, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Angola, are expected to be affected. Though, as it stands now, we just know that this $15,000 affects Malawi and Zambia. The bond amount is refunded if the applicant leaves the United States within the allowed window of time in line with their visa and complies with the terms of all of their visa statuses. Now, to the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza, and US President Donald Trump has said that a decision over whether to fully occupy the Gaza Strip is pretty much up to Israel, as he declined to support or oppose the potential expansion of Israeli military activity in the enclave. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Now trying to get people fed. As you know, $60 million was given by the United States fairly recently to supply food, and a lot of food, frankly, for the people of Gaza that are obviously not doing too well with the food. And I know Israel's going to help us with that in terms of distribution and also money. We also have the Arab states are going to help us with that in terms of the money and possibly distribution. So that's what I'm focused on. As far as the rest of it, I really can't say. That's going to be pretty much up to Israel. Yeah, please.
Well, his comments come as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with senior security officials on Tuesday amid reports that he wants to stage a complete military takeover of the Strip. Now, after months of ceasefire talks have stalled, Netanyahu and Trump are reportedly working on a deal that presents Hamas with an ultimatum: either release the hostages and agree to terms to disarm, or the war continues. You can see pictures there of Gaza back before the destruction, and of course Gaza thereafter, currently today, which is just a stark reminder of what war does to people's homes. Now, you'll remember that Trump himself did propose a US takeover of Gaza earlier this year, an idea which, of course, was condemned around the world. Finally, today, August 6th, marks 80 years since the first use of a nuclear weapon. On this day in 1945, the US dropped a nuclear bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima near the end of World War II. Now, a US B-29 bomber dropped the atomic weapon known as Little Boy on August 6, 1945. 3 days later, the nearby city of Nagasaki was destroyed by a second US atomic bomb. More than 110,000 people were killed instantly in the attacks, while hundreds of thousands more perished from injuries and radiation-related illnesses over the years. To this day, those two instances remain the only times a nuclear weapon has been used in warfare. Despite that, nuclear weapons continue to present a very present-day threat. Now, Russia's war in Ukraine, the India-Pakistan conflict, and Iran's enrichment of uranium, or reported enrichment, have all added to these fears. Now, Japanese grassroots organizations of survivors that actually won the Nobel Peace Prize last year for its pursuit of nuclear abolition say the world faces a greater nuclear threat today more than ever. Those are your stories. Love to hear your thoughts before we move on to papers.
Okay, I'll tie two stories together. Completely 80 years ago today, the Americans with a B-29 bomber called Enola Gay dropped those two disastrous bombs that shaped humanity. Developed by Oppenheimer in the deserts of Los Alamos. Today, the world has not recovered. But what were the parameters 80 years ago? We had Hitler, that was a nationalist, that was a populist, that was against the order of the world and felt he could conquer the world. And Hitler had reigned supreme, was going at it. He had spin doctors like Goebbels. And with that, caused a stir in the world. At some point, people like Neville Chamberlain that could have taken him up when he tried taking over Sudontaland left him. And that was what made Winston Churchill say, you can't keep giving a crocodile meat hoping the crocodile will go away because it will eat you last. You can't keep being an appeaser. In fact, the quote is, an appeaser is somebody that gives the crocodile meat hoping the crocodile will eat him last. And Hitler was against the Jewish people. 80 years after, Femi. The same Jewish people, Israel, led by Benjamin Netanyahu. In fact, I'm going to exonerate the Jewish people because over 80 top security officials wrote a letter to Trump telling him to stop this war. So it's not about the Jewish people again. The same Netanyahu, that sadly is a Jewish man, and his government are now doing worse than what Adolf Hitler did 80 years ago. Are now starving people, destroying lives, letting people starve to death.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, America, that was the Cape Crusader for freedom then, is now emboldening these atrocities. Same scripts, just like Hitler. A populist, Netanyahu was also a populist. Spin doctors, have spin doctors, just like Trump too is doing today. Trying to take over the world. What is Trump trying to do? American exceptionality, taking over the world with trade policies and tariffs. No care for human rights. Exactly the same play 80 years after. And that's why you see people saying today they are more afraid of a nuclear bomb and an onslaught. The question is, if we don't fix the world today and say the truth today, who will be the tyrants of the next 80 years?
That's the question. Thank you, Nicole.
Right. I always like to focus on Pan-African issues. Now, the U.S. visa bond that has been introduced on Zambia and Malawi of $15,000, $10,000, $5,000 respectively, they said they will decide at the point of your visa interview, is for me just so tragic. Not in that it's very important to travel to the United States, but in the fact that Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, that belt of countries used to be known as the breadbasket of Africa. Malawi, the decline of Malawi has been a very painful thing to watch because just over a decade ago, the Malawi passport was one of the strongest passports in Africa. You could travel to the UK, most of the EU. You could travel mostly around the world visa-free. So you used to have people actually looking for ways to get a Malawian passport, just maybe 15 to 20 years ago, so that they could travel freely around the world. But what happened to Malawi? Malawi, for me, is a perfect example of what happens when we follow the IMF recommendations by the book. Because when structural adjustment programs started, that was in the late 80s, early 90s, is when we started seeing an inflow of workers from Malawi coming into countries like Zimbabwe. They were coming to be farm workers. So if you go to most Zimbabwean farms now, you'll find several Malawi citizens. Most of them have naturalized. Most of them may not even be able to trace back their origins. But Malawians have now created a culture of migration. That has become their culture now. So to now see that there's this migration has extended to the United States, there's overstaying happening and so forth, is just an indicator of the failure of Malawi's government to be able to cater for its people. Also look at the case of Zambia. With Zambia, when Hakainde Hichilema came into office, it's almost been about 4 or 5 years now, it was supposed to be a moment of celebration because it was one of the first opposition victories against a ruling party in that region that we'd seen. Oh, people said that he was coming with hope. There would be great promise. He was going to turn the economy around. It's not so easy. One of the things that they thought, the milestones they thought would be one of his victories, is the fact that he was able to do a renegotiation with some of the debt that Zambia owed and so forth. But that has proved to be not as easy as it seems. Now, he came in at a point where the Zambian kwacha, the currency, was the currency that we used to joke about. The Zambian kwacha, this was before Zimbabwe went into hyperinflation, was a currency that you say, please don't give me kwacha. It was you know, the highest. Rufai, please mind your business. So this was before hyperinflation hit Zimbabwe, and our own currency went through the same thing. Quite humbling, isn't it? Because after that, the Zimbabwe dollar, of course, became the running joke. However, my main point is that so sad to see countries known for agriculture, for their produce, for heavy investment, and being able to export, whether it be cotton or whether it be food, they were exporting globally. And now there are people who are listed, who are being blacklisted, and Americans are saying, you're coming to our country, we're overstaying, we don't want you. This is a failure of African leadership, in my opinion.
Okay, let me see if I can run through the 3 topics editorially, very quickly. Now, what was the setting in 1945? It was World War II. Now, the US and the Allies, they were fighting on one front, Germany, Hitler. Now, by 8 May 1945, Hitler surrendered. But there was also the problem on the Pacific. Japan, the imperial armed forces of Japan having continued, almost 50 years of aggression in the Pacific. Now, in July 1945, the US and the Allied forces told Japan to surrender or to face annihilation. Now, meanwhile, the US and the Allies, they've been developing what they call the Manhattan Project. And they had sent forces to station close to Japan in a place called the Mahaninia. Yes. And so they had their troops, they had the nuclear capability stationed right there. Now, Japan refused to surrender or did not even respond. So, on August 6 and 9, the US and the Allies made good their promise. They descended on Nagasaki, on Hiroshima, on August 6. And that was the first time nuclear weaponry will be used. And Japan is the only country that will have suffered from nuclear attack. 3 days later, they attacked Hiroshima.
Nagasaki.
Nagasaki. Hiroshima first, Nagasaki first. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had also declared war against Japan. They attacked Manchuria, and they said they were going to eliminate Japan. So Japan found itself in a very difficult situation. 5 years later, the same Japan had to surrender. However, so as not to give all the details, what now happens is, the question is, what lessons has humanity learned from what happened 80 years ago? About 150,000 to 464,000 persons died in the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Others, civilians, suffered from bombs, napalm, and all of that. The world was confronted with the danger of nuclear war. What has happened to nuclear disarmament? What has happened to all the peace frameworks that are in place? In other words, it will appear that with the reality of the war that we have in India, Pakistan, that was managed, the threat in Russia, Ukraine, also between Israel and Hamas, the world is still under threat.
Absolutely.
So we are reminded forcefully, 80 years later, of the need for peace. Now, there are other subjects. There are two other subjects. I'll try to be very quick. Trump says it's not out of place if Israel decides to take over the whole of Gaza. Trump himself said in February that he was going to create a Riviera of the Middle East in Gaza. So you cannot be surprised that Trump is now standing like this. He doesn't even believe in the rights of the Palestinian people. And I think that is the big problem in this particular regard.
Absolutely.
Now, the far right in Israel are also saying that Israel should wipe out Palestine. This is the problem. The hypocrisy of the United States in this matter and the far right mentality of Israel. What are they looking at? If they take over the whole of Gaza, that's ethnic cleansing. That's genocide. And that, again, is a violation of international law.
Yes, it is.
And that point should be made all the time. As for the other subject, well, I hear we don't have enough time. But the other day you were saying Made in Nigeria is also on the list. And I had to caution that Nigeria is not there. Let's not do auto-suggestion and say Nigerians will have to come and pay 15,000 bond. But it's a pilot program.
Yes, it was a pilot program. Yesterday it was in the newspaper review.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that Nigeria had to. It was up to 15,000. So it could be from 5 to
5,000 to 15.
To 15.
Yeah,
Up to
but
15.
Nigeria has not even been mentioned.
No,
Nobody should
point,
introduce Nigeria into it.
Yes, at this point it's just Zambia and Malawi. But US in Abuja, the US mission in Nigeria did tweet something. So that's what we picked up yesterday. Never mind. Let's go on to newspaper review. Let's go on to the newspaper review. Let's take a look at the this day does lead. You people have plenty money. Don't start that.
Don't try it.
This day leads with the Tinubu administration still displaying its commitment to northern Nigeria. As Minister for Housing and Urban Development, Ahmed Musa Dangiwa unveiled major milestones recorded under the federal government's Renewed Hope housing program across northern Nigeria, which boasts 6,112 homes, the upgrade of 150 slums, and the creation of 152,000 jobs. And speaking of some of those jobs, it is reported that site workers are earning 150,000 naira monthly. Now, moving on to the New Telegraph this morning, the New Telegraph reports on President Tinubu signing an insurance industry reform bill into law as part of this target for this $1 trillion economy. The New Telegraph also leads with the Independent National Electoral Commission warning politicians as they report early signs of campaign breaches. Now, Politics also leads the Daily Trust this morning. Its headline asks Southern candidate Jonathan Obi. Now, speaking of Peter Obi, the Vanguard reports that his pledge to serve just one term is kicking up dust. That's as former APGA chairman Chief Chekwas Okorie says that Obi's promise smacks of desperation. Where did he hear that from? Well, meanwhile, the Daily Sun leads with the People's Democratic Party zoning its presidential ticket to the south. The party's chairman will still come from the north. That's as Kano pledges to deliver 1.5 million votes for Tinubu. Now, there's also news on the Daily Sun of the Anglican Church of Nigeria announcing the end of its relationship with its sister church in Wales in the United Kingdom over the Welsh church electing Bishop Cherry Van, who is a lesbian and the first woman archbishop in Britain. Now, The Punch leads with the nationwide alert from federal government as it warns of 5 days of flooding in 19 states from Tuesday to Saturday this week. Flooding has already hit Ogun State and Gombe. Flooding so far in 2025 has killed 191 people, unfortunately, and left 94 missing. First Lady Senator Oluremi Tinubu has also donated 1 billion naira to victims of flooding in Niger State. Finally, The Guardian does lead with concerns from importers over the new customs levy of 4% free on board. Importers say they're worried about passing these costs down to consumers and saying that that extra cost could dissuade them from purchasing imported cars. Those are your papers from across Nigeria.
Thank you so much for that roundup, Adefemi.